My son said, "You're paralyzed, I don't want you at my wedding." So I left everything to my daughter. The kettle is screaming again. It's the old kind, the kind you set on the burner and forget if you're not careful. I can see the steam curling up from its spout, thin and ghost-like, drifting toward the ceiling. The kitchen smells like scorched metal. I try to move my hand flexes, but my legs do not. The stroke happened 3 months ago, left side mostly. I can feel pressure in my thigh and my calf, but nothing listens when I tell it to move. The doctors say it could improve, or not. I've been practicing with the chair, the rails in the hallway, the occupational therapist with soft eyes and firmer hands. But it's slow, and sometimes I just sit here and let the kettle scream. This morning I sit in my small house just outside Asheville, North Carolina. I've lived here for 42 years. It's filled with knickknacks from yard sales and memories that smell like cornbread and cedar wood. The window is open. The magnolia tree outside is in bloom. A breeze carries in birdsong. Somewhere in the background, my body betrays me piece by piece. I reach for the burner knob with trembling fingers. The kettle wails louder. For a second, I feel a flicker of panic. Will it catch fire? Will I be fast enough this time? But then I hear a key in the door. Mom, my daughter calls. Lila. Always Lila. She rushes into the kitchen, turns off the burner, moves the kettle to the sink. The steam hisses and dies. She turns to me, eyes scanning my face. "Did you try to get up again?" she asks softly. I don't answer. Instead, I look down at my hands, still gripping the arms of the chair. "It's okay," she says. "You don't have to explain." She makes tea from the same kettle, adds honey, the way I like it, and places it on the table beside me. I nod in thanks. My son hasn't been here in weeks. His name is Marcus. He lives an hour away. Since the stroke, he's made 2 appearances, both short. The first was stiff, full of awkward questions, and a reminder to stay strong. The second was mostly silence. He stayed for 13 minutes. I timed it. His fiancée Dana stayed in the car. It's funny what you remember when your life shrinks to a single floor, a set of grab bars, and whether or not your tea stays warm. Lila sits across from me now, reading out loud from the local paper. She reads the gardening section, even though I haven't been able to tend to the yard since the stroke. But I listen. I imagine roses blooming and dirt under my nails. I imagine standing again. "Do you want me to open the windows in the back?" she asks. "Yes," I whisper. "Please." She nods and disappears down the hall. The house breathes with new air. For a moment, it feels like nothing has changed. But I know better. There's a heaviness to this silence, one that sits between the ticking clock and the cooling tea. It's the weight of being needed less by the child I once rocked, to sleep the child who now walks on without me. Leela returns and we talk about the weather, about the neighbor's new puppy, about groceries. But I know what's coming. There's an envelope on the counter, cream-colored, heavy stock. The kind of envelope that carries life announcements, births, graduations, weddings. I saw it earlier when she set down her purse. It had Marcus's handwriting. I didn't ask. I just stared at it. Lila sees me looking at it now. Her face tightens. "Do you want me to read it?" she asks. "No," I say quickly, "leave it." But she doesn't. She opens the flap and pulls it out. It's a wedding invitation, elegant calligraphy, pale gold ink. "You are cordially invited to the union of Marcus James Campbell and Dana Elaine Worthing. The date is 6 weeks away, a vineyard, evening ceremony, semi-formal." I say nothing. Lila sets the card down gently. Her voice is quiet. "You're going right." I don't answer. I wish I could pretend I hadn't already imagined it, how I would look in the crowd, the only one in a chair. The glances, the pity, the way Marcus might flinch at having me wheeled into a photograph. Lila doesn't press. She just reaches over and lays her hand on mine. The sun shifts across the hardwood floor. Outside, a mockingbird lands on the windowsill. Its feathers twitch. Its head tilts. My legs won't move. But something inside me has already started shifting. If you were in my shoes, if your own son handed you an invitation and forgot to say, "I can't wait to see you there," what would you feel? What would you do? Sunday used to be my favorite day. When the kids were little, it meant blueberry pancakes, church at 10, and Marcus fighting Lila for the front seat on the way home. I could still hear their voices echoing down the hallway, laughter bouncing off the old wallpaper. 2 sets of feet pounding up the stairs like the world couldn't wait. Now Sundays feel like they arrived just to remind me of what's missing. The house is too quiet. No running feet, no pancakes, just the ticking of the kitchen clock and the hum of the refrigerator, constant cold and indifferent. Marcus started coming on Sundays after the stroke. At first I thought it was guilt. He brought frozen meals and left them on the counter, asked if I needed anything, then stood awkwardly near the doorway like someone waiting for a train, always checking his phone, always with one foot out the door. Lila still comes too, only she doesn't bring guilt. She brings banana bread, lavender hand lotion, and books she thinks I'll like. She never checks the time. She'll sit with me for hours, even if neither of us says a word. Marcus comes at 2:00 p.m. on the dot. He stays until about 2:30, sometimes less. He never comes with Dana. He says she's busy with wedding prep, but I see it in his eyes he's relieved she's not here. She doesn't like the smell of old houses. She told me that once. Last Sunday, he walked in holding a manila folder. He didn't kiss my cheek or ask how I was feeling. He sat down across from me at the dining table and slid the folder over. "Venue deposit," he said. "Thought you might want to see it." I looked at the sheet of paper, rows of numbers, and a photo of a sprawling vineyard draped in string lights. It was beautiful, of course. It looked like something out of a magazine, but nowhere did it mention a ramp, or wheelchair access, or how his mother would be expected to attend. I glanced up, waiting. He didn't say anything else, just sat back and looked around the room like he was counting the things he might someday inherit. I asked him quietly, "Do you want me there?" His jaw tightened. He avoided my eyes. "You don't have to worry about it, Mom. We'll have it recorded." Recorded. He said it like that would soften the blow, like watching it on a laptop from my living room would feel the same as seeing my only son marry the woman he chose. I didn't answer, just nodded, folded the paper back up, and passed it to him. My hand trembled slightly. I don't know if he noticed. I hope he did. Later that day, Lila came by. She brought cinnamon rolls and a thermos of fresh coffee. She kicked off her shoes and settled into the chair across from mine like she belonged there. And she does. She noticed the folder immediately. "What's that?" Nothing, I said. She waited a beat before asking, "Did Marcus come by?" I nodded. She didn't ask anything else. Just opened a novel and started reading out loud, her voice low and even. I didn't follow the story. I was too caught in my thoughts, how differently she sees me, how gently she still includes me in the world, as though I haven't changed. It's strange what makes you feel human again. The smell of cinnamon, the weight of a real mug in your hand, someone reading to you like you matter. I don't think Marcus sees me anymore. Not really. Not since the wheelchair became part of me. Maybe it embarrasses him. Maybe he doesn't know how to hold the woman who once held him when he had night terrors and needed to be rocked back to sleep. Or maybe he just doesn't want to. There's a loneliness that comes not from being alone, but from being made to feel like a burden. And that's what Sunday has become. A quiet ritual of measuring love by how long someone stays. Lila helps me into bed that night. She adjusts the pillows the way I like fluffs the one beneath my knees and asks if I want the door open or closed. She says goodnight with a kiss to my forehead like I once did for her when she was 7 and scared of thunderstorms. And I lie there staring at the ceiling wondering, what did I do to raise 2 children so differently? Where did I lose Marcus? The envelope came on a Wednesday, thick cream-colored with our family's last name embossed in gold across the back. It smelled faintly of perfume Dana's, I assumed. I let it sit on the side table for 3 days before I opened it. Not because I didn't know what it was, but because I did. Lila was the one who finally said, "Do you want me to open it for you, Mom?" I nodded. She slipped her finger beneath the seal and pulled out the invitation. Elegant, expensive. Every letter pressed so deep into the paper it could have drawn blood. She read it aloud. "The pleasure of your company is requested at the wedding of Marcus James Campbell and Dana Elaine Worthing." Then came the time, the date, the location, a vineyard 2 hours away nestled in the Blue Ridge, evening ceremony, outdoor seating, dress code semi-formal, RSVP by the 15th. Lila paused. It doesn't mention anything about accessibility. Of course it didn't. It wouldn't occur to them that someone in a chair might want to attend. Or maybe it did occur to them and they didn't want the reminder at their picture-perfect event. I took the invitation from her hands and studied the fine print. Marcus's name stared back at me. My son, my firstborn. I remembered his tiny hands curled around my finger the day he came home from the hospital. I remembered staying up all night when he had colic, walking the floor with him, pressed against my chest. I remembered the scraped knees the school plays the day he got his driver's license. Every second of it. And now I was being invited to his wedding, like a distant relative. No phone call, no mom, I'm getting married, just an envelope and a deadline. Still, I tried to be gracious. When he came by the next Sunday, I handed him the RSVP card with my name already written in. I'd like to be there, I said softly. He hesitated, just a blink, but I saw it. Sure, he muttered, tucking it into his jacket pocket like he didn't want it seen. We'll figure it out. Then he changed the subject. He told me about the catering options. Dana wanted lobster bisque as a starter, but he thought it was too rich. He chuckled about linen swatches, about trying on tuxedos. He was animated, bright alive in a way I hadn't seen in years. But he never once said, I want you there. Lila showed up later that evening with a loaf of crusty bread and a jar of homemade blackberry jam. She asked how the visit went. He talked a lot, I said. She didn't ask what about. She just sat next to me on the couch and turned on the lamp beside us. Then she reached into her purse and pulled out a small photo album. Remember this? It was our family trip to Gatlinburg back when Marcus was 13 and Lila was 10. There was a photo of the three of us in front of a log cabin, me holding both their hands, my hair whipped around by the wind. I used to think this was the best picture ever taken of us, I whispered. Now I wonder if he remembers it at all. Lila looked at me, eyes soft. He remembers, he's just different now. I didn't reply. I didn't know how. The truth is, I don't know when Marcus changed. Maybe it was slow, like rust, or maybe it happened all at once and I missed it. He used to be tender, thoughtful. He cried during Bambi, for heaven's sake. He once saved a baby bird that fell from a tree and tried to feed it mashed up berries for 3 days straight. So how does a boy like that become a man who flinches at the thought of pushing his mother's wheelchair down a grassy aisle? Lila stayed until after dark. Before she left, she wrapped me in a soft green shawl she'd knitted herself. You'll look lovely in this, she said, for the wedding. And I smiled because I wanted to believe I'd be there, that I'd be part of it, that Marcus would come around. But deep down, something had already started to sink, not like a rock, more like a slow, steady tide pulling the sand from beneath your feet. If your child, your own flesh and blood, was ashamed to be seen with you, would you still go? Would you sit in the front row and smile for photos? Or would you finally let go? It was raining the day Marcus came by alone, a quiet, steady kind of rain that made the roof whisper. Lila had called to say she wouldn't make it that day. Car trouble, she said. I didn't mind. I liked the rain. I liked the sound of it, how it softened the world. But when I heard Marcus's knock at the door, a small, anxious knot curled in my stomach. He never came on a Tuesday. I wheeled myself to the front room and unlocked the door. He stepped in without saying much, shook the water from his jacket, and looked around like he hadn't been here 1,000 times. Dana's at a dress fitting, he said by way of greeting. Figured I'd swing by, like I was a pit stop. I nodded and gestured toward the living room. Sit if you'd like. He did, but not near me. He chose the armchair by the window where the rain streaked down in narrow rivulets. He leaned forward, elbows on knees, hands clasped. I wanted to talk to you about something he started. That phrase, that godforsaken phrase, the one people use right before they crush you gently. He wouldn't meet my eyes. I know you RSVP'd, he said, and I appreciate that, Mom, I really do. I said nothing. I let the silence stretch like taut thread. But I've been thinking and talking with Dana, and it might not be the best idea for you to come. The words fell like bricks, quiet, heavy, permanent. I blinked. Why not? He shifted. It's going to be outside, on a slope. There's gravel. The seating isn't really suited for me, I said, finishing it for him. He had the nerve to look relieved. It's not personal, he rushed to explain. It's just, We've worked so hard on making this day perfect, and Dana, well, she has a vision and I don't fit in it." That stopped him cold. His mouth hung open for a second like he wasn't expecting me to say it out loud. Then he did the thing that will live in the pit of my stomach until my last breath. He leaned forward and said, "You're paralyzed, Mom. You don't want all those people staring at you. I know you. You'd hate it. You'd feel uncomfortable." It took everything I had not to cry. "I'd rather feel uncomfortable," I whispered, "than unwanted." His eyes darted away. "It's not like that." "It is exactly like that," I said. "You made a choice." He stood up, already uncomfortable with the emotions in the room. He hated confrontation. Always had. He was the kind of boy who would rather walk away from an argument than feel it settle in his bones. "I'm not trying to hurt you, Mom," he said. "I'm just trying to keep things smooth." Smooth? Like I was a wrinkle. He looked toward the door, then back at me. "We'll have it recorded. High-quality video. You'll feel like you were there." I wanted to scream, to say I don't want pixels. I want people. I want to see your face when you say I do. I want to be your mother on the most important day of your life. Instead, I said nothing, because I couldn't trust my voice. He left without hugging me, and when the door clicked shut behind him, I sat in the darkened room and stared at the carpet for a long, long time. I must have been still for over an hour, long enough for the rain to stop and the sky to start glowing pale gold, long enough for the kettle in the kitchen to whistle and for me to ignore it completely. When Lila arrived later that evening, she found me like that silent, unmoving, wrapped in the green shawl she made me. She didn't say anything at first, just walked over and knelt beside me. And I broke. Everything inside me cracked open. The shame, the humiliation, the fury I didn't know I had left in me. I told her everything, every word Marcus said. I told her how he looked at me like I was in the way, like I was a blemish on the edge of his perfect life. Lila didn't cry. She didn't gasp. She didn't even blink. She just said, "Then don't go." I looked at her. "What? If he doesn't want you there, then don't go. And don't give him the parts of you he's decided to discard." She stood and walked to the kitchen, putting the kettle back on the stove. The room filled with the sound of rising steam, not screaming this time, just heat, controlled, contained. "I'll be here," she said softly, "on the day of his wedding. If you want to sit together and make a new kind of memory, I'll be here." And she meant it. If your own child told you not to come to their wedding because you were in a wheelchair, would you forgive them? Or would you finally start thinking about who truly deserves your love? The night after Marcus told me not to come, I barely slept. I lay in bed staring at the shadows on the ceiling. Every creak of the house, every groan of old wood under changing temperature, reminded me of years gone by nights, pacing the hallway with a fevered baby in my arms, afternoons filled with laughter, spilling from the kitchen, teenage voices, arguing over who left the cap off the toothpaste. Now the house was quiet, so quiet it rang in my ears. I felt small in that bed, smaller than I'd ever felt before. And I thought to myself, is this it? This is what raising a son leads to a wedding. I'm not allowed to attend because I might clash with the decor. The next morning, I sat by the window in my wheelchair, still in my nightgown, holding a mug of tea that had long gone cold. The magnolia tree was shedding its blossoms, petals like pale ghosts scattered across the lawn. Then I heard Lila's car in the gravel drive. She didn't knock. She never did. She came in holding a brown paper bag and a tote slung over her shoulder. "I brought potato soup," she said, cheerful as always. "And I picked up that mystery novel you liked from the library. Thought you might want to start a new story." She paused when she saw my face. Without asking, she set the bag on the counter and came to me. She crouched down, one hand on the armrest, the other gently placed over my cold fingers. What happened? I didn't mean to cry, I really didn't. But the moment she looked at me, really looked at me, without shame, without pity, without flinching, my chest cracked open. I told her everything. I told her what Marcus had said. The slope, the gravel, the "we'll have it recorded." I told her about how he used the word smooth like I was an obstacle to be smoothed out. And I told her I had RSVP'd before he even thought to say a word. Lila listened. She didn't speak. She didn't interrupt. She didn't wince or try to defend him. She just listened. And when I was finished, she didn't fill the silence with anything loud. She didn't suggest solutions. She didn't say, "He didn't mean it." She didn't try to make excuses for a brother who had grown selfish in ways only a mother could understand too late. She just leaned her forehead against the side of my arm and stayed there. I felt the warmth of her skin, the steadiness of her breath. "You don't have to go," she whispered after a while. "Not to prove anything, not to earn your place." I nodded, because what else could I do? My own son had drawn a circle for his future and left me outside of it. But my daughter, my sweet, loyal, steady daughter, she kept pulling me back into the light. That afternoon, she helped me get dressed. Not because I needed to go anywhere, but because she said you deserve to feel like yourself again. She laid out soft linen pants and a blue blouse I hadn't worn since last summer. She brushed my hair and braided it gently down the side. She even dabbed a touch of lip color across my mouth. "You look radiant," she said with a wink. I looked at myself in the mirror and didn't see a burden. I saw a woman who had survived everything, a husband's early death, a stroke, and now this, an emotional wound cut by her own flesh and blood. Lila made us lunch. She read to me from the novel. She brought in the newspaper and clipped out a recipe for summer peach cobbler, setting it on the counter with a smile. "We'll try this next week," she said. And I believed her. She didn't see me as broken. She didn't see me as someone to hide. She saw her mother. Later that day, while she watered the plants on the back porch, I watched her from the window. The late sun lit her hair like fire. She moved confidently, as if she belonged exactly where she was. And I thought about what it means to be chosen, not out of obligation, not out of guilt, but chosen because someone wants you in their life wholly and unapologetically. That night, I slept deeply. Because sometimes love doesn't come from the place you expect it. Sometimes it shows up in the form of a daughter kneeling beside your wheelchair with eyes that don't look away. If your child looked at you and only saw your limits, but your other child looked at you and saw your heart, who would you give everything to? The day of the wedding dawned bright and warm. Not a cloud in the sky. The kind of golden syrupy morning that begs to be celebrated. Birds chirped louder than usual. A breeze slid through the trees like a whisper of something hopeful. But I sat in my living room in silence. I'd already picked out a dress, a lovely navy wrap that Lila helped me order online with little embroidered vines around the cuffs. It still hung in the closet with the tag-on sleeves empty, waiting for a day that wouldn't come. I stared at the clock. The ceremony was set for 4 p.m. It was 3:17 when I felt it a twist in my stomach. Not anger, not grief exactly, something softer. A quiet ache in a place that had already been worn thin. Lila was in the kitchen humming to herself. She was making tea and chopping strawberries. She didn't mention the wedding, didn't say his name. But everything about her presence said, "I'm here." I stayed. She came into the room holding a tray, 2 cups of chamomile, a small dish of lemon shortbread cookies, my favorites. "It's almost time," she said, sitting beside me. "Want to watch a movie?" I hesitated. Should we turn on the live stream? She looked at me with such gentleness. "Do you want to?" I shook my head slowly. "No, I think I'd rather not see what I was never supposed to be a part of." She didn't argue. Instead, she reached over, placed a blanket across my legs, and hit play on Sabrina, the old one with Audrey Hepburn. We watched it in silence, the glow of the screen lighting our faces. At 4:00 sharp, I knew they were exchanging vows under twinkle lights and garlands of eucalyptus. Somewhere champagne was being poured, laughter shared, pictures taken. Somewhere my son was marrying the woman he chose and pretending I didn't exist. The truth is, I tried to convince myself it didn't matter. But every time the clock moved, I imagined the moments passing. The kiss, the applause, the photos formal and posed without me. Would he think of me when they took family portraits? Would anyone notice I wasn't there? Would anyone even ask? Halfway through the movie, Lila reached over and touched my hand. I turned to her, surprised to find tears sliding down her cheeks. "Sorry," she whispered. I can't believe he left you out like that. You raised us. You gave him everything, and he erased you from the most important day of his life." I squeezed her fingers. He didn't erase me, sweetheart. He just misplaced me. She looked confused. I smiled faintly. He thinks he can store me away somewhere, like an old photo album, but he'll find out eventually that memories don't stay quiet forever. We didn't finish the movie. Instead, we moved to the porch where the late afternoon light turned everything golden. Lila lit a candle on the small table beside my chair, and we sat watching the wind carry magnolia petals across the yard. I told her stories ones I hadn't told in years, about Marcus as a boy, about the day he brought home a stray kitten and begged to keep it, about how he cried when I gave away his first tricycle, even though his knees were too big for it. Lila laughed and cried at the same time. I wish I remembered him like that, she said. I did too. But the boy who used to sneak into my bed during thunderstorms was not the man who sent me an invitation out of obligation and then told me not to come. At 5:12, the sun began to set. The light touched Lila's hair, turned her face soft and gold. She looked over at me and smiled. "I'm glad you didn't go," she said, "because I would have missed you." And that's when it hit me. I wasn't missing anything at all. I hadn't been excluded from a celebration. I'd been spared the pain of watching someone I loved pretend I was invisible. I looked at my daughter, my constant, my anchor, and I felt something unexpected. Gratitude. If your child decided you weren't convenient enough for their big day, but another child brought you shortbread and held your hand while the world turned, wouldn't you start to see everything a little clearer? Wouldn't you start to let go? A week after the wedding, I found Marcus's voice echoing down the hall. He was on the phone, standing just outside the guest bathroom, the one with the leaky faucet and the old light that flickers when it rains. I had wheeled myself into the hallway to get a sweater from the linen closet when I stopped. His back was to me. He didn't hear the quiet squeak of my wheels, didn't know I was there. I mean, come on, he was saying, his voice low but clear. The place is falling apart. She's got, 5-10 years left tops. It's a nice lot. Someone could fix it up, flip it maybe. My heart stopped. He chuckled. Lila doesn't have the stomach to deal with it, you know. But I do. I've got vision. Another pause, then quieter. No, she doesn't know. She still thinks I'm the good guy. I backed away before I heard more. The hallway stretched long and cold behind me, and I suddenly felt like a ghost in my own home. 5 to 10 years. He wasn't talking about my health. He was talking about my expiration date. That evening, when he came to say goodbye, he kissed my cheek. Too quick, too polite. I didn't bring up what I heard. I didn't let on. But something inside me had shifted. It wasn't the first time I'd been disappointed by him, but it was the first time I realized he was counting down the days until I was gone. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat up in bed staring at the ceiling fan as it spun its slow, rattling circles. And then I saw it. The file folder in the drawer of my bedside table. The will. When my husband died 20 years ago, I'd had everything rewritten. At the time, Marcus was my rock, the reliable one. Lila was still drifting, unsure of her future. It had seemed logical, fair. 60% of the estate to Marcus, 40% to Lila, the house to Marcus since he was the eldest and the one who had plans for it. Now those plans sounded like dollar signs and demolition. I got up slowly, carefully, and wheeled myself to the writing desk in the living room. The folder was old, but the pen I grabbed was new. Lila had bought it for me last Christmas, engraved with "Love Always, Lila." I opened the document and began to read line by line. Every word once written in faith now made my stomach twist. I didn't feel angry, not exactly. I felt sober, like someone waking up from a long, beautiful dream only to find the room dark and cold. How had I missed this in him? Had he always been this calculating, or had life carved it into him, this hollow place where love used to be? I crossed out his name, once, then again and again. I rewrote the distribution, gave the house to Lila, the savings too, the family heirlooms, the old ring that had belonged to my grandmother, the one Marcus once asked if it was worth anything. I signed the bottom my hand, trembling only slightly. Then I sat back in the quiet breathing harder than I expected. Some part of me had waited, hoped that he might redeem himself, that the wedding was a fluke, a blind spot, but now I saw it clearly. I was no longer a mother in his eyes. I was a ledger, a square of property, a name to be crossed out once the ink dried. And still I hesitated for just a second. I thought of his baby curls, his little boy laugh, the way he used to say, "I'll protect you forever, Mama." But forever has a funny way of getting shorter when money's on the table. When Lila came by the next day, I didn't tell her what I'd done. Not yet. Instead, we baked banana bread and watched old episodes of Murder, She Wrote. She laughed at the same parts I did. She offered to clean out the garage next weekend. She told me she'd ordered new filters for the furnace without being asked. She stayed, not for inheritance, not for guilt, just for me. So I watched her, how she folded the dish towel just so, how she swept a hand across the counter when she thought I wasn't looking, how she caught my eye and smiled without asking for anything in return. And I knew I had made the right choice. If your child stands in your house and talks about your future in past tense, but another one walks in and simply asks if you've eaten who deserves your legacy, who deserves your love. The day I rewrote my will, the sun poured through the living room windows like honey, warm, quiet, undisturbed. I sat at the same desk where I'd once helped Marcus with his middle school science fair project, where I'd written birthday cards, grocery lists, notes to the school excusing Lila for colds she exaggerated to get one more day with me. That desk held decades of life inside its little drawers, but today it held something else resolve. My hand hovered over the paper for a long time. It wasn't just about dividing assets or naming beneficiaries. It was about telling the truth, finally, on paper, about admitting out loud in black ink who had really been there when I needed someone most. I took a deep breath and began. To my daughter, Lila Grace Campbell. I leave the house in its entirety and all property contained within. I leave the savings account ending in 2947. I leave the family heirlooms, including my mother's wedding ring and my grandmother's silver comb. I leave the photo albums, the recipe box, the quilts, and the cedar chest. I leave the memories of a life built together, not out of duty, but devotion. To my son, Marcus James Campbell, I leave the photographs of your childhood, because that's the version of you I choose to remember. I hope one day you find your way back to that boy. When I finished, I didn't cry. I expected to, but there were no tears left. Just the soft exhale of someone who had carried too much for too long and was finally setting it down. I took the papers to my lawyer the next morning. A kind man named Walter, who wore thick glasses and always offered me lemon drops from a jar on his desk. He glanced over the new documents, then looked up at me with a hint of something cautious. "Are you sure?" he asked. I didn't hesitate. Yes. He nodded and made it official. That night, I slept better than I had in months. But there was something else, something I hadn't told anyone, not even Lila. In the top drawer of my bedside table, under an old scarf and a half-used tube of hand cream, sat a sealed envelope, my handwriting on the front. It read, "To be opened in the event of my passing." Inside was a letter, a simple, honest explanation. For Marcus. "Marcus, I loved you every second of your life. That part never changed, but people do. And one day I realized you didn't see me anymore, not as your mother, not even as a person. You saw me as an inconvenience, a weight, something to step around on your way to the future. So I chose not to let you carry my legacy, because love without respect is not love, and I will not be remembered by someone who refused to remember me when it mattered most. Your sister never left. She never looked away, and that is what matters. I hope one day you understand. Love, Mom. I don't know if he'll ever read it. I don't know if he'll ever forgive me. Maybe he'll be furious. Maybe he'll storm into this house someday with red eyes and clenched fists, asking, how could you? But I'll be gone, and it won't be my job to teach him anymore. I spent 35 years trying to raise a good man. But at some point, a mother has to stop bending to make her children feel tall. When Lila came over that weekend, I watched her haul down a box of old Christmas decorations from the attic. She wasn't looking for anything in particular, just organizing cleaning, preparing for the winter. She looked at a broken ornament, laughed, and said, "Remember when Marcus stepped on this one trying to hide Dad's present?" I nodded. I remembered it well. And for the first time, I didn't feel pain. I felt distance, the kind that protects. She sat with me later that evening and painted my nails a soft pink I used to wear back when I still worked the front desk at the public library. We sipped lemon tea and played a game of cards. She let me win. I let her think I didn't notice. And when she leaned her head on my shoulder, I whispered, "Thank you for seeing me." She didn't respond with words. She just held my hand. If you raised a child who turned away and another who never once let go, wouldn't you finally rewrite the story to reflect the truth? Wouldn't you finally stop pretending love is owed to those who don't offer it back? I didn't tell them. Not Marcus, not Lila, not yet. I wanted to see something first. Not revenge. I don't have the energy for that, but clarity, yes. Confirmation. A quiet test of truth to see what people do when they think there's still something left for them to take. So I waited. I left the new will in Walter's hands tucked safely behind his files and lemon drop jar. The old one, the one that named Marcus as primary beneficiary, I tucked into a drawer by my bed, right where Marcus knew to find it. Then I said nothing. And I watched. Lila came every Saturday without fail. She brought groceries, never the cheap kind, but the good things she knew I liked. Ripe pears, sourdough from the farmer's market, that expensive yogurt with the glass jars. She never once mentioned the house. Never asked about money. She didn't know I'd already signed it all to her. And yet she scrubbed the bathtub tiles when my back ached. She ironed my sheets. She sat beside me and painted her own nails so we could match. Meanwhile, Marcus texted. Short messages, sparse. "Hey, you need anything? Dana says hi. We might swing by next week." But he didn't swing by. 2 weeks passed, then 3. Then one Sunday afternoon, he showed up without warning. He was holding a box of pastries from a bakery I'd never heard of and a smile I didn't trust. Too bright, too smooth. He hugged me, kissed my cheek, and glanced around the room like a man inspecting a property. "How are you feeling, Mom?" he asked. "Tired," I said honestly. He nodded sympathetically. "You've been through so much. I've been thinking maybe we should start making some plans. You know, long-term care-assisted living. That sort of thing." I felt my hands tighten on the arms of the wheelchair. "I'm fine right here," I said. He gave a soft laugh. "Sure for now. But what about next year or 5 years from now?" There it was again, that countdown. "I like my house," I said, "and I have Lila." Something flickered in his eyes. "Lila's great, yeah, but she's busy. She's got work, she's got her own life." "So do you," I replied. He cleared his throat. "I just don't want you worrying about stuff, Mom. Dana and I were talking, and, well, if you ever decide you're ready to downsize, we'd be happy to help with the process. List the place, fix it up, sell it." That's what he meant. "Marcus," I said quietly, "why are you really here?" He blinked. "What? I haven't heard from you in weeks. You didn't even call on my birthday." He looked down. I texted. "You sent a gif of a balloon, Marcus." He had no defense. I leaned forward. "So why are you here now?" He hesitated just a beat too long. Then slowly his eyes drifted toward the drawer by my bed, the one where the old will sat untouched. And that's when I knew. He still thought his name was written across the future, still believed he was next in line, that everything in this house, the paintings, the rugs, the garden tools, the land, was waiting to be passed down to him like some entitlement. He looked at me again, smiling in that practiced way. "We should talk about your will soon, just to make sure everything's in order." I stared at him for a long time. I could see the boy I raised somewhere deep in those eyes, but he was buried beneath years of polished ego ambition and convenience. "You're right," I said. "We'll talk soon." And he left satisfied, believing the world still bent in his direction. When Lila came later that day, I didn't tell her about the visit. Instead, I asked her to sit on the porch with me. The air smelled like rain was coming. She didn't ask questions. She never pushed. She just sat beside me, humming softly, legs curled under her as if she'd grown from the porch wood itself. And I knew. I'd tested them both, not with anger, not with accusations, just with time. And the results were clear. If someone only shows up when they think there's something to claim, is it love? If another shows up every week with kindness, never once asking what's in it for them, is that not the definition of devotion? If you were me, would you need to ask again? Or would you finally trust what's been right in front of you all along? I turned 71 on a Thursday. It was quiet, gentle, The kind of day that arrives without fanfare but holds its breath for meaning. The morning sunlight poured across the dining room table. I sat by the window in my favorite cardigan, the one with the pearl buttons and a tear in the sleeve I've never bothered to mend. The house smelled like cinnamon. Lila had baked me a cake the night before and left it covered under a glass dome like a treasure waiting to be opened. She arrived before noon, humming a tune I didn't recognize and carrying a small wrapped box with a red ribbon tied in a crooked bow. "Happy birthday, Mama," she whispered, placing it in my lap. Inside was a silver frame, polished and simple, holding a picture I hadn't seen in years. It was a photo of me standing in the backyard holding baby Marcus in one arm and Lila in the other. My head was tilted back in laughter. I looked so alive, so strong, so full. Lila leaned down and said, "I wanted you to remember who you've always been." I clutched the frame to my chest and nodded. My throat ached with words I couldn't say out loud. We lit a single candle on the cinnamon cake and sang off-key, just the two of us. She danced a little, spinning her arms as if the living room were a ballroom, and I laughed in a way I hadn't in months. At 3:00 p.m., the doorbell didn't ring. At 5:00 p.m., the phone didn't buzz. At 6:13 p.m., a message came through. "Marcus, hope you had a good one. Things have been hectic. We'll come by soon." No call, no gift, no memories shared. Just 7 words and a placeholder promise. I stared at the message until the screen dimmed. Lila glanced over. "He didn't call." "No," I whispered. She didn't say anything right away. She just reached across the table, cut a slice of cake, and set it on my plate. Then she poured me tea and said, "You're loved, you know." And I did, because she was right there feeding me warmth slice by slice. Later that evening, after she left, I sat in the quiet and let the day settle over me. The house creaked in that old familiar way, like it was speaking softly to itself. And I thought of all the birthdays that came before the ones where Marcus made construction paper cards with stars drawn in crayon, the year he saved his allowance to buy me a silk scarf from the drugstore, the time he made me breakfast in bed and spilled orange juice on the sheets. What happened to that boy? What hollow part of life swallowed him whole and spit out this man who thought a text message could replace a memory? That night I pulled out the framed photo again, the one Lila gave me. I studied the smile on my face, how natural it looked, how freely I held both my children like the world had been built just for them. But that version of my son is gone now. And maybe the most heartbreaking part is not the loss of him, but the realization that he doesn't feel lost at all. I was the one left behind, but not alone, because love that shows up with cake and a photo frame, love that sings to you when no one else remembers the day you were born, that kind of love is louder than any absence. The next morning, I wrote a letter, not for Marcus this time, but for Lila. I sealed it and placed it beside the new copy of my will. Inside it said, "You have been my home when everything else felt cold. You have given without asking, stayed without needing. You have honored me in ways that cannot be inherited. This house is yours, not just because it's in my will, but because you have filled it with laughter, care, and time, the most generous currency of all. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for staying." If your child forgets your birthday, if another shows up with candles and stories, which one is your legacy? Which one is your heart? There's something they don't tell you about growing older. People stop looking at you like a person and start seeing a silhouette, a shadow, an outline of who you once were. They think quiet means weak. They think a slow step means a slow mind. They forget that age is not the absence of power, but the refining of it. I spent the next few weeks sharpening that quiet power like a blade. I made lists, phone numbers, bank accounts, titles, and deeds. Everything I owned was suddenly on paper, underlined, categorized, ready. I sat for hours in the evenings with Lila by my side, her reading aloud, me nodding. Both of us curled under the same patchwork blanket that once covered her crib. She didn't know what I was planning. She didn't need to. She'd already passed the test. But Marcus, I wasn't done with him yet. One afternoon, I asked Walter, my lawyer, to draft a letter on official letterhead. Nothing threatening, just a gentle inquiry. Per your previous conversation with your mother regarding future estate planning, please contact our office to confirm your role as stated beneficiary. It was bait, plain and simple. The next day, Marcus called me. His voice was smooth, too smooth, like someone who's just been told a prize is still within reach. "Hey, Mom, got something from your lawyer, just checking in, everything okay?" I told him yes, that it was just a routine review, that I wanted to make sure everything was clear. I could practically hear the gears turning in his head. He offered to come by that weekend. Dana, he said, was busy with a bridal shower for her cousin, so he had the day free. Of course he did. He arrived in a crisp polo shirt and shiny new shoes, brought store-bought muffins and fake concern. He looked around the house like it was already halfway his. We sat at the dining table, the same one I'd polished every week since the Reagan administration. I was thinking, he began, maybe we should talk about the future, just to get ahead of things. "Of course," I said, folding my hands. "You're still planning to leave the house to me, right?" he asked. He tried to sound casual, but his fingers tapped against his coffee cup. I tilted my head. "Why would you assume that?" He blinked. "Well, I'm the eldest. I've always been listed." "On the old version," I interrupted, "the one you never asked about until now." He paled. "Wait, what do you mean?" I looked at him and saw him not the boy I raised, not the baby I once held, but the man who thought kindness could be withheld and still cashed in later. I said slowly that I've changed it. He sat back, the color draining from his face. "You... what?" "I've changed the will," I said, voice calm. "Everything goes to Lila." He stared at me. "But, Mom, that's not fair. Neither is telling your paralyzed mother she's not welcome at your wedding." He stood up suddenly. "This is ridiculous. You're punishing me." "No," I said. "I'm remembering." He started pacing. "So what, Lila gets everything because she changed your sheets and brought you soup? This house should be mine." I turned toward him fully, slowly. My voice dropped to something colder. "This house belongs to the person who made it a home again when I was ready to give up." He looked like he might say more. He didn't. He stormed out 10 minutes later, slamming the front door so hard, a framed picture of him and Lila as kids tilted sideways on the wall. I didn't move to fix it. I sat there feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Power. Not because I was cruel, not because I'd taken anything away, but because I had finally claimed my own voice. A woman alone is not helpless. A woman alone can still write checks, change wills, hold secrets, and set fires without ever striking a match. That evening, Lila came by with a potted violet plant and a smile. She didn't ask about Marcus, she never did. Instead, she trimmed the stems of the flowers and placed them on the windowsill. "You okay?" she asked. I smiled truly and nodded. "I'm perfect." Because I was. If you were me, if you'd spent your whole life being gentle and now finally found steel in your bones, wouldn't you feel it too? Wouldn't you finally understand that grace and power are not opposites? They're sisters. It didn't take long for Marcus to return. 3 days to be exact. He didn't call, didn't text, just showed up unannounced as if he still had a key to the parts of me I'd already locked away. I was in the garden room trying to coax the last blooms of late summer from the hydrangeas. Lila had set up a small table near the window for me with shears, gloves, and a spray bottle. I could trim from my chair, hum to the plants if I felt like it. And I often did. The doorbell rang twice sharply. I knew it was him. Lila wasn't due till tomorrow, and Marcus had always rung the bell like it owed him an answer. When I opened the door, he was standing with a folded brochure in one hand and a set of sunglasses perched too high on his head. He didn't smile. "Can we talk?" he said. I nodded and moved aside. He walked in like it was still his right. We sat at the dining table again. He unfolded the brochure. It was glossy full color with words like Legacy Estates Accessible Luxury and Turnkey Property Solution. He slid it toward me. "I found a realtor who specializes in helping seniors transition," he said, his voice cool, practiced. "They'll handle the entire process from listing to liquidation. You wouldn't need to lift a finger." "I see," I said, not touching the brochure. "I've already spoken to one of their representatives," he added. "They say the land alone could fetch a good price." I looked at him, at the man he'd become. No emotion, no warmth, just angles and calculations. "And where would I go?" I asked softly. He blinked. "Well, there are options. There's a new facility opening in Hendersonville. Dana's aunt moved in last month. Says it's great. They have bingo, garden access, a salon. I stared at the spot on the table where Lila had polished the wood just the day before. "You want to sell my house," I said. "I want to help," he replied. "No, Marcus, I said you want to own." He leaned back, frustration showing through the cracks now. "Mom, come on. You're not going to be here forever. Wouldn't it make sense to start planning ahead? I'm just trying to take care of things so they don't fall apart." "They already have," I said quietly. He sighed as if I were the difficult one, as if I were making this harder than it needed to be. Then, like a magician playing his final card, he said, "I know about the will." I raised an eyebrow. "Do you—" He nodded. "Walter's letter. You may not have said it outright, but I can put things together. You're giving everything to Lila. Is that it?" I didn't deny it. He ran a hand through his hair, then scoffed. "She manipulated you. You know that, right? She made herself look good. She's playing the long game." I stood up, slowly, carefully. But I stood. "No, Marcus," I said. "She just showed up." He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "You're really going to do this," he said, voice rising. "After everything, I'm your son." "And I'm your mother," I replied, steady as stone. "And you told me I wasn't welcome at your wedding. You spoke about my house like it was already sold. You counted my years like you were calculating a deadline. You didn't see me." He looked away. "Do you remember I asked what you said to me when you were 8 years old the day after your father died?" He didn't answer. "You crawled into my bed, tucked yourself under my arm, and said, 'Don't worry, Mama, I'll take care of you forever.'" He rubbed his face. "I was a child." "Yes," I whispered, "and you were more of a man then than you are now." He stood, jaw clenched, the brochure still on the table, untouched. "I hope you know what you're doing," he said. "I do," I said. "For the first time in a long time, I really do." He walked out without another word. When the door clicked shut, I turned back to the table. I picked up the brochure, tore it in half, then again and again until it was confetti in my lap. That evening, Lila arrived with a bag of groceries and a soft scarf she'd knitted in pale gray. She didn't ask if Marcus had come. She only said, "It smells like you've been baking." I hadn't, but somehow the house did feel warmer. I looked at her and smiled. "No one's selling this house," I said. She smiled back, not needing to know the rest. "If your child returns only to measure what they can take, but another stays asking for nothing at all, who would you trust to carry the keys to your history? Who would you want to leave behind as the keeper of your story?" It happened 2 weeks later. Marcus came back this time with a different tone, quieter, more measured. The kind of silence that follows someone who's lost control but still thinks they might get it back if they speak gently enough. He brought coffee, my favorite from the little shop on Main Street, the one he hasn't remembered for years. He placed it carefully on the side table beside my chair, as if proximity to warmth might substitute for sincerity. I didn't drink it. He settled across from me, legs crossed, posture, casual, rehearsed, the kind of calm that people mistake for humility, but really it's calculation. Marcus always did know how to smile with only half his face. "Mom," he began, "I think we got off track." I said nothing. "I've been thinking about what you said, about how I've made you feel. I just want to fix things." I tilted my head. "You want to fix me?" He flinched. "No, I want to fix us." I let the silence stretch between us long and heavy. Then I reached for the drawer in the side table, pulled it open slowly, and retrieved the folder. He leaned forward slightly. "Is that?" I nodded. "It's the will." He swallowed hard. His eyes stayed fixed on my hands as I opened the folder, pulled out the crisp new documents, and laid them on the table between us. I didn't speak. I let the words printed in black ink do the talking. He scanned them. His shoulders stiffened. "Everything." To Lila, he said, voice flat. "Yes." He looked up, something dark flickering in his eyes. "You're really doing this?" "I already did," I said softly. He leaned back, arms crossed. "So this is punishment?" "No," I said, "this is clarity." He shook his head slowly. "She doesn't deserve it." "She showed up," I replied, "over and over, without conditions, without expectation." He laughed, dry, bitter. "So that's all it takes? Bringing groceries and a couple casseroles." "No," I said, voice rising just slightly. "It takes love, and presence, and respect. It takes seeing me, not just the chair, not just the house, not just the ticking clock." He stood suddenly. "You're not being fair." No, I said, rising to meet his gaze as much as I could from my seat. You're not being honest. He stared at me. I stared back, and for a brief moment I saw him as he once was, the boy who needed me, the boy who clung to my waist when he was scared of the dark. But that boy was long gone. You'll regret this, he said finally quietly. No, I whispered, you will. He left without another word. I didn't cry. I didn't crumble. I wheeled myself back to the kitchen, put the untouched coffee in the sink, and turned on the faucet until it poured down the drain. That night, I found the letter I'd written to him weeks earlier, the one tucked away in case of my passing. I added one final line at the bottom. And when I showed you the truth, you chose rage over reflection. The next morning, Lila arrived early. She brought sunflowers, bright, bold, unapologetic. She placed them in a vase and kissed my cheek. How are you feeling today? I looked at her and smiled. Free. Later, as we drank tea and watched the light move across the floor, she read a poem aloud. I don't remember the title, only a single line that stuck with me. What you do not give love to forgets how to bloom. And I knew I hadn't forgotten. I'd only remembered who had truly watered the garden of my life. If your child sees your vulnerability as weakness, but another holds it like something sacred, something still beautiful, what would you do? What would you leave behind? It's been 4 weeks since I handed Marcus the papers. 4 weeks since he stormed out with fury in his eyes and entitlement in his spine. He hasn't called. No texts, no emails, no letters, just silence. A wall where once there was a sun. And in all honesty, the silence doesn't hurt the way I thought it would. It's peaceful, predictable. I know where I stand now, and there's freedom in that. There's no second-guessing, no late-night hoping, no more bargaining with the memory of a little boy who doesn't live inside that man anymore. He's gone. And the house has never felt more full. Lila has been here nearly every day. She waters the plants. She keeps the fridge full. She insists on wiping down the countertops even when they don't need it. She says it's her version of therapy. She's brought laughter back into these rooms. She's stitched new breath into the walls. Last week, she reorganized the linen closet. Yesterday, she baked a pie and left 2 slices in the fridge for late-night cravings. Today, she brought over an old photo album she found in her storage unit pictures, from when they were kids, from before everything started slipping sideways. We looked through it together. There was a photo of Marcus, arms around Lila's shoulders, both of them missing teeth, standing knee-deep in the river by the old campground we used to visit. Their father had taken that picture. His laughter had echoed through the woods right before he snapped it. He loved us so hard, Lila said softly, touching the corner of the photo. He did, I nodded. And I see him in you. She smiled at that, blushed even. And then almost timidly, she asked, do you think he'd be disappointed in Marcus? In all of this? I paused. The question hung between us like dust in sunlight. No, I said, I think he'd be heartbroken. She nodded, silent. We turned another page. There was a photo of me standing behind a birthday cake, beaming both children on either side of me. My hand rested on Marcus's shoulder. He was grinning, gap-toothed, and wild-eyed. Lila looked at me, then her voice barely above a whisper. Do you miss him? I didn't answer right away, because the truth is complicated. I miss the boy who used to dance in his pajamas at breakfast. I miss the boy who insisted I be in every family photo. But I don't miss the man who came with papers and calculations, the man who saw my life as a transaction. And so I told her the truth. I miss who he used to be. She nodded again, and we left it at that. That evening, Lila stayed late. She made soup chicken with wild rice, and we listened to the rain tapping gently on the roof. She lit candles, even though we didn't need them. She said they made the night feel softer. When she tucked the blanket around my legs and turned on the radio to one of my old favorites, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Safe. Not in a physical sense, but in that deeper place. The part of you that forgets it's allowed to rest. The part that always braces for the next disappointment. That part was quiet now. After she left, I sat by the window and watched the streetlights flicker on. The trees swayed like they were remembering something. And for the first time, I didn't think about Marcus. I thought about Lila. I thought about all the little ways she had chosen me, and I realized this wasn't about punishment. It was about peace. She stayed. She always stayed. If you had to choose between someone who showed up with love and someone who only came for what they could take, would you hesitate? Would you even look back? It's early morning, the kind where the air feels still like the world hasn't quite remembered to wake up yet. The light is soft, filtered through lace curtains touching the walls of my bedroom, like it's asking permission to come in. I breathe in slowly, letting the quiet settle into my chest. There is no more storm, not now. The house is calm. Lila came by last night, as she always does on Sundays. She brought lavender oil and rubbed it gently into my hands while we talked about nothing in particular, how the neighbor's dog learned to open their back gate, how the tomatoes in the garden are finally ripening, how it's supposed to rain all week. We laughed. We sat in the silence between stories. We existed together in a way that felt real and unrushed. After she left, I wheeled myself to the desk and opened the drawer one last time. The old will is still there, unchanged, untouched. I held it in my hands, studied my own handwriting from years ago, the version of me who hadn't yet known this kind of grief, this kind of clarity. Then I placed it in the fireproof box I keep in the closet, not to revisit, but to release. I've let go. The new will is with Walter finalized and signed. The house belongs to Lila now. The bank accounts, the small collection of keepsakes and heirlooms, the photo albums, the dusty, half-forgotten boxes in the attic filled with school crafts and letters tied in string. All of it. Hers. Because she earned it not through blood, but through presence. Through the slow, faithful showing up of someone who still saw her mother behind the wheelchair. This house feels different now, warmer. The walls don't echo like they used to. The floorboards creak with comfort, not loneliness. The air carries the smell of rosemary and lemon, not dust and disappointment. I hear birds outside the window. A kettle whistles softly in the kitchen, not with accusation this time, but invitation. And I know I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Marcus hasn't reached out again. I don't expect him to. He's chosen his silence just as I've chosen mine. But I don't hate him. I don't wish him harm. I simply wish him peace somewhere else. Somewhere far from this home he no longer recognizes. Lila will be here again tomorrow. She said she found a recipe for peach cobbler and wants to try it with me. She's already bought the peaches, said they were so soft they bruised with a sigh. I smiled when she said that, because that's how this whole season has felt, soft, bruised, but still breathing. If you've ever loved someone who forgot how to love you back, if you've ever been seen only when you were useful, then ignored when you were not, you'll understand why I did what I did. I didn't choose revenge. I chose remembrance. And I gave everything to the one who remembered me when I needed it most. The days are slower now, but they are sweeter too. In the mornings, I listen to the birds outside my window and think about all the versions of myself. This house has held young wife, tired mother, grieving widow, proud parent, forgotten woman, and now simply me. Not what I used to be, not what someone needs me to be, just the woman who still wakes up with thoughts that matter, memories that bloom like jasmine in the corners of her mind. I've come to learn that peace doesn't arrive loudly. It tiptoes in sometimes through the smallest gestures, a warm cup of tea, the brush of a hand on yours, the sound of your name spoken softly by someone who means it. There's a kind of dignity in choosing to protect your story, to guard it, to pass it on with care to someone who will tend it with both hands and a full heart. I no longer worry about whether Marcus will come around. If he does, I'll greet him with the same kindness I always tried to give. But I won't let that kindness be mistaken for weakness again. I've earned the right to draw my lines in soft earth and to let love bloom where it's wanted. When I sit on the porch now, I watch the light change across the lawn. I watch my daughter in the garden singing to herself, sleeves rolled up and hands in the soil, planting something new, where something old once lived. And I feel content, not because I have everything, but because I gave everything to the right person.